Attention 65-plus viewers. For those of us who remember a time when Washington, D.C. meant something different, when the Department of Justice was a respected and impartial pillar of our society, and when a member of Congress could debate without fear of intimidation, what we are witnessing today is deeply troubling. We built this country on the foundation of fair play, equal application of the law, and respect for the office, not the person. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's message is a necessary and courageous call to return to those bedrock American values. She is speaking directly to the profound sense of unease many of you feel when you watch the news and see institutions, which were once symbols of integrity, becoming seemingly politicized and weaponized. The question we must ask ourselves is simple, yet devastatingly important. What good is a rule of law if it's only applied to those who lack power and ignored for those who possess it? This isn't a left versus right issue. This is about the survival of the fair and principled system we dedicated our lives to uphold. 2. The congressional mandate, writing laws, not litigating. Congresswoman Crockett begins by reminding Washington of its core constitutional function, a function that, frankly, has been obscured by endless political theater. She points out the glaring hypocrisy of members of Congress who act as self-appointed judges, juries, and executioners on the legislative floor. We are supposed to be writing laws, not try to have our own trials and determine whether or not something is true or not, or whatever the case is, or who should be sued, who shouldn't be sued. This is an argument for institutional self-respect. When elected officials abuse their platforms to settle personal scores or to predetermine guilt, actions reserved for the judiciary, they are actively undermining the separation of powers and the delicate balance of our republic. This behavior erodes public confidence and distracts Congress from its real job, tackling inflation, securing our borders, funding vital Social Security and Medicare programs, ensuring a stable future for our grandchildren. The focus has become retribution, not resolution. 3. The senator's wisdom, right versus wrong. Crockett powerfully references the words of a good senator who was shattering a historical record for holding the floor, a record previously held by a racist in this country. The senator's profound point was, this should not be about left versus right. It should be about right versus wrong. This single phrase is the gravitational center of her entire response. It is a filter through which every action taken by the Department of Justice, every statement made by a political opponent, and every use of executive power must be scrutinized. When law enforcement is used to threaten a political opponent, is that right or wrong? When a wealthy individual receives special federal protections unavailable to the average taxpayer, is that right or wrong? When members of Congress must deal with rising death threats due to divisive rhetoric, is that right or wrong? By demanding a return to this fundamental moral compass, Crockett is appealing to the common ethical framework shared by Americans across the political spectrum. It's a plea to stop the partisan madness and anchor our decisions in universal moral truth. 4. The cost of divisive rhetoric, a shared threat. Crockett makes a chilling observation that should alarm every single citizen. The sharp incline in threats upon the lives of sitting members of Congress, regardless of their party. She shares a rare point of agreement with her political adversary, the chairman. They both endure more death threats than anyone should have to face. She attributes this terrifying reality directly to the divisive rhetoric and the selective enforcement of things being broadcast from the highest levels of government and media. Think about it. When leaders repeatedly frame opponents as existential enemies, or when they use government agencies to target critics, it sends a dangerous signal to most extreme elements of society. It legitimizes political violence and makes public service a hazardous profession. For our older generation, who lived through eras of respectful political competition, this climate of hostility is unacceptable. The rhetoric must cool, and accountability must be restored, not just for the sake of the politicians, but for the safety and sanity of the entire nation. The political abuse of power is directly resulting in the erosion of our civil society and placing everyone, including those in the audience, at greater risk. This segues perfectly into the next segment, the specific and alarming instance where this general divisive climate became a direct, personal threat. The unprecedented overreach, law enforcement threatens a legislator. The moment that catalyzed Congresswoman Crockett's fiery response was the appearance of Attorney General Pam Bondi on television, a network that Crockett dismissively but pointedly calls faux news. This instance, she argues, is not a simple political disagreement. It is a visible public politicization of law enforcement by the highest agent in the country. Bondi, as a sitting law enforcement official, allegedly used a major media platform to deliver what Crockett viewed as a direct threat against a sitting member of Congress. For an older audience that values order and process, this is a truly alarming situation. The Attorney General is supposed to be the nation's chief lawyer, upholding the law impartially. When that powerful office is used to send a retaliatory warning against a legislative critic, it signifies a dangerous breakdown of checks and balances. Crockett is unambiguous. To have her go on Fox News and to then decide that she wanted to send a threat to me, it was wrong. The optics are terrible, and the constitutional implications are profound. 2. Defending the First Amendment, the right to criticize. The core of the confrontation revolves around Crockett's exercise of her First Amendment right to free speech. Her initial comments, which led to the alleged threat, included sharp, public criticism of powerful figures like Elon Musk, a topic we will delve into further in Segment 3. Crockett makes it absolutely clear that she will not be intimidated into silence. She emphasizes that she is not a bridge from doing, meaning she won't be stopped from exercising her right to free speech. The law must protect the right of a politician to criticize the powerful, the wealthy, and even those connected to federal contracts. When the legal system, or those who run it, attempts to silence a lawmaker based on their opinions, it is an attack on the very concept of representative democracy. Furthermore, Crockett proactively dismisses any claim that her comments were reckless or promoted lawlessness. She specifically recounts her history of advising protesters to make sure you consult with lawyers, a responsible, legally sound piece of advice that demonstrates respect for the legal process, not contempt for it. This detail is crucial because it refutes the implicit charge that she was encouraging illegal behavior, highlighting that the threat against her was motivated purely by politics and retribution. 3. The pattern of retribution, the DOJ's role. The issue extends far beyond the personal exchange between Crockett and Bondi. The Congresswoman reveals that she is not the only one receiving political warning shots. The fact that there are other city members that have received letters of threat from this new DOJ tells me that they are about retribution, and they are not about following the law. This is the most serious charge, that the Department of Justice is being weaponized to settle political scores. For an audience that has witnessed the power of the DOJ throughout history, from civil rights enforcement to protecting national security, the idea that it is now prioritizing retaliation against sitting lawmakers over its primary mandate is a betrayal of public trust. If the DOJ is acting with a selective focus, targeting critics of the administration while protecting its allies, it is fundamentally undermining its own credibility and the stability of our entire system. This pattern of behavior creates a chilling effect on all political dissent, suggesting that disagreeing with the powers that becomes a legal risk. Crockett's stand is therefore a defense not just of herself, but the integrity of the constitutional offices themselves and the right of every American to speak their mind without fear of legal consequence. The two systems of justice, wealth and power versus the people. Congresswoman Crockett uses the figure of Elon Musk as the paramount example of the hypocrisy she is railing against. The visible proof of a dangerous double standard where the law is applied differently based on one's wealth and political proximity. This segment addresses a profound American grievance, the perception that there is one set of rules for the rich and powerful and another for the rest of us. Crockett pulls no punches, labeling Musk as someone who is operating above the law. This isn't just about personal dislike. It's about the systemic privileges afforded to individuals with astronomical wealth, privileges that fundamentally contradict the ideal of equal justice under law. 2. The catalog of undue privilege. To substantiate her claim, Crockett provided a powerful list of specific, seemingly unwarranted benefits Musk enjoys, benefits that are inaccessible to the average small business owner, entrepreneur, or citizen. Exclusive federal contracts. She questions how Musk can sit around and get whatever federal contract we want, while the rest of American businesses must navigate highly competitive, transparent, and often bureaucratic processes. This implies a level of influence that bypasses standard accountability and fairness. Federalized private security. Perhaps the most shocking assertion is that he can secure the ordination of his private security staff as federal law enforcement to protect him. The federal government's authority and jurisdiction are meant to protect the public and national interests. To assign that authority to protect a private individual and their assets suggests an unprecedented and inappropriate use of public power for private benefit. Government protection for assets. She also mentions a federal protection extended to his dealerships. While other businesses struggle with basic security, a private corporation receives what amounts to a federal subsidy of protection. Crockett concludes that Musk's ability to obtain these extraordinary protections and contracts simply because he has a lot of money, more money than everybody else, is the very definition of a system corrupted by wealth. This is a hardy issue. The government is actively enabling one person to operate in a sphere where the law and the system seemingly bends to his will. 3. Defending dissent as a democratic right. The Congresswoman then links her direct criticism of Musk back to the threat she received from Attorney General Bondi. The crooked system. She calls Musk a crook based on perceived actions, such as the mass firing of employees and the alleged manipulation of the federal contract system. Celebrating dissent. She even expresses happiness that on her birthday, there were peaceful protests around this world against him. This is a key point. She is affirming the constitutional right to peaceful assembly and protest as a necessary check on private power. The Attorney General's alleged threat, therefore, was not merely defending a private citizen. It was an attempt to use the highest law enforcement office to silence political dissent against a figure who is viewed by many as an ally of the current political machine and who benefits from government favoritism. The message to the American people is stark. When the government prioritizes protecting the political and corporate elite over safeguarding the constitutional rights of its critics, it ceases to be a government of the people. This is a selective enforcement that tears the country apart and destroys faith in the very concept of American justice. The disconnect. Where is law enforcement when we need it? Congresswoman Crockett shifts the focus away from Washington's political drama and onto the core mission of law enforcement, serving the everyday American. She highlights a fundamental betrayal of public duty. The system is so focused on political skirmishes and protecting the elite that it is failing to respond to the real, visceral crimes that impact ordinary citizens. The only thing that we're asking is that we have law enforcement that will show up when there is an actual crime. She lists essential services that are being neglected while the Department of Justice seems preoccupied with political retribution, investigating cybercrime and fraud that often targets older Americans, tackling the horror of child pornography, responding to and thoroughly investigating robberies and violent offenses. The irony is stark. The highest law enforcement agencies are allegedly being weaponized against political critics, while citizens facing genuine danger and loss may feel ignored. This misplaced priority is not just inefficient. It's an active contributor to the erosion of public trust in institutions that are supposed to be protectors, not political tools. 2. Fighting equity, the barrier to fair policing. Crockett then introduces a powerful, systemic factor contributing to the distrust: the ongoing, highly public war against diversity, equity, and inclusion, DI. She argues that the administration's rhetoric against DI directly affects how justice is dispensed on the ground. When she suggests a citizen might call for help only to face an officer who looks at them and acts as if just because I'm black or because I'm a woman that I am not worthy of having that case investigated, she is connecting the political climate to real-world discriminatory outcomes. The continuous railing against diversity creates a culture within law enforcement where different perspectives and experiences are devalued. The necessity of perspective. This is not a request for a handout. It is a pragmatic argument for better policing. Crockett argues that having diverse representation, someone who may show up and looks like me, is critical because it brings a level of rapport and understanding to the situation. This perspective ensures that officers do not unconsciously dismiss a case or fail to grasp the nuances of a situation simply because the victim comes from a background different from their own. Image illustrating the concept of systemic bias in a legal context. 3. The cost of homogeneity, a nation torn apart. The Congresswoman returns to her central theme, right versus wrong. She posits that our country is torn apart because we can't even agree on basic ethical standards. The anti-DI stance is an ideological commitment that undercuts the operational ability of law enforcement to serve a diverse nation fairly. when officers are appointed, promoted, or trained in an environment that actively devalues diverse perspectives. The result is predictable: selective justice. Cases involving marginalized communities may be deprioritized or mishandled, reinforcing the feeling that justice is only for a privileged few. Therefore, the battle over DI is not merely a social or political debate. It is a practical fight for the integrity of the justice system. Crockett asserts that genuine, impartial law enforcement cannot exist without valuing the very diversity of the public it is sworn to protect. This failure to value equity is why citizens feel they cannot rely on agencies to show up and investigate their crimes. A crisis of faith rooted in the belief that the system is looking out for everyone but them. The origin of principle, a story from the trenches. To counteract the cynicism and political maneuvering she has described, Congresswoman Crockett offers a powerful, personal anecdote from her early career as a public defender. This story is not merely a historical footnote. It is the ethical blueprint for her current fight, providing a stark contrast to the self-serving political behavior she calls out. She recounts being hired despite having no prior criminal defense experience. Her boss, Charlie, was skeptical, but Crockett's pitch was revolutionary in its honesty and practicality. She looked him in the eye and said, "You should hire me because I'm black." This assertion wasn't about quota. It was about perspective and efficacy. She explained that her identity would give her a vital head start. "When I walk in, I'm going to walk in with a level of rapport and understanding, then maybe some of my other colleagues will not." 2. The definition of true service: dedication to all. Charlie offered her the job because he recognized the intrinsic, practical value of that lived experience in the pursuit of justice. The resulting dedication is the final, crushing rebuttal to the idea that diversity is a distraction from competence. Crockett emphasizes, "I worked my butt off and I worked really, really hard for all my clients, not just those that look like me." This story is the ultimate proof that perspective is a professional asset and that true service transcends political divisions. It means bringing your unique background to the table to ensure that every client, every constituent, and every American receives a diligent, committed defense or representation they deserve. This is what it looks like to serve. 3. The unwavering conclusion: fearless leadership. The entire speech, from the initial hook to this closing anecdote, builds to one final, defiant conclusion. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett will not be silenced or intimidated. She has used the alleged threat from Attorney General Pam Bondi not as a deterrent, but as a catalyst to expose the systemic rot beneath the surface of the federal government. She has identified that the current battle in Washington is not a typical political spat. It's a fundamental crisis where constitutional rights are threatened by the powerful. Law enforcement is being weaponized for political retribution. The rule of law is bent to protect the wealthy elite like Elon Musk. Crockett is standing tall, speaking truth to power and defending the integrity of her office and the rights of her constituents. Her message is clear for all. The fight for justice, fairness, and the equal application of the law is right versus wrong. She is reminding the American people that courage and principle are still alive in Washington, and that fearless leadership is the only way to challenge an administration that seeks to silence dissent and abuse its power. This is a definition of a true leader in action.